So we're gonna get started soon. Has everybody downloaded GameMaker Lite for their computer?
Does this one already have it?
No, you have to install it. So go to the club blog, GameDev@blogspot.com, and the first post on there should have all the links you need. I guess let's do a show of hands. So how many people have downloaded GameMaker 8.1? Okay.
Some of you might have accidentally
Yeah.
downloaded GameMaker Studio, which is the latest version.
Yeah, so if you have Studio, please get GameMaker 8.1 from this link, or the webpage is yoyogames.com/legacy. This is the version we'll be using for today. Good question. Let me finish doing the show of hands. So, okay, does everybody have the source files for the starter files? Okay. Does anybody not have it and doesn't know where to find it? Okay. So who here uses a Mac? Like uses the Mac operating system? So if you're a Mac person, please download Lateral GM in addition. So Lateral GM it's a developing environment that lets you code, that lets you write GameMaker code, but you won't be able to run it unless you get a GameMaker 7, and you have to do a sort of version conversion with Lateral GM in order to open it with the Mac operating system. So if you need help with that, I can help. But how many people here have prior experience with programming? Okay. So this will just help me pace myself. It's okay if you haven't coded before. Coding is not a mandatory requirement. Let me show the 3 files that I have here and what they all are. So if you open the tutorial folder if you extract out the contents of the starter files I provided, I have 3 files: Mega Man Full, Mega Man _Ling, and Mega Man _starting. So the starting is the template that we'll be using. The full version has basically all the code written, and you can use it as a reference if you get lost at any point. And if you get lost, also feel free to ask me, and I'll try my best to help. The lean version is basically full except with all the sound taken out of it. So the reason I did this is because adding sound assets to the game makes it take much longer to load. And if you're testing it, you don't really need the sound until you implement the sound. So consider using the lean version as a reference if you also want to modify the full source file and try to run it when you modify it. Also, this way we won't have like Mega Man music coming out of every laptop, which isn't a bad thing per se. Okay, so let me, can everyone hear me? You cannot hear me, okay. So let me go behind the reasoning for getting GameMaker Legacy, and I'll try to do like a sort of what is GameMaker talk. So the reason we're using GameMaker Legacy for today is that Yo-Yo Games, the company which owns GameMaker, actually has 2 products. They have GameMaker. On the Windows, it's 8.1. On the Mac, they have, I believe, 7.0. And they have a separate product called GameMaker Studio. So I believe GameMaker Studio was rewritten, and it's a product that Yo-Yo Game actively maintains. Whereas GameMaker is the version that has a long history behind it. I think it's been in development since 2003 by some personal hobbyists before they were purchased by Yo-Yo Games. So they both provide light and what do they call it for full version? I'm just gonna say full. They might call it something different. I think they call it standard. So they both have light and full versions. But the reason we want to get light for the legacy version of GameMaker is because it doesn't have as a strict of a limit as the GameMaker Studio Lite version does. So if you look under how much resources I have in the full code, I have a bunch of different objects here. The GameMaker Studio version probably doesn't support having this much objects. Maybe, I think the limit is 15. I might just be barely, I think I am at exactly 15. But it's not really enough if you want to make a sort of complex game. So the best way to try out GameMaker is to use the 8.1 Lite version. And if you like it, then you can go for Studio and get the full version. You can get the, let's see, I think the legacy version is, wow, $40. Okay, so the full version for this is $40. And the full version for this is, I think, $49. If you decide to go to the full version, I recommend you get this one instead because it's the one that Yo-Yo Game actively maintains, and they will add new features to it as they continue to improve it. And yeah, so last December, they were on a sale, and by sale, I mean they were free to download for the standard version. So if you're interested, but you don't want to dish out $50, then you can wait for some sort of sale to come up. And if a sale comes up, I can post it to our club's Facebook page or email if necessary. So by club, I mean UA GameDev Club. Have you all heard of UA GameDev? Yes, no? Has anyone not heard of UA GameDev? That's a better question. Oh, okay. So, well, we are a club on campus that meets every Monday from 5 to 6 to discuss game development and game design. We do a ton of events within the CS department. We have, first of all, a bunch of workshops. We have weekly meetings, and each month we have a game night. Later on this semester, we'll also have a game jam, which is a 48-hour game development marathon. We held 2 game jams before, and they were both really fun. We have people sitting behind who can attest to that. So that's kind of one of the motivations behind giving this talk. In 48 hours, you can't really make a sort of quality, polished game starting from scratch. You kind of have to start from somewhere, whether it's a framework or a rapid development tool like GameMaker. And I think GameMaker has, or a rapid development tool by far has the lower barrier to entry than getting your own framework and figuring out how to use the framework. So let me show the Mega Man version I have. So this one, the full source file, I made this in about 8 hours, I think. And everyone here has played the original Mega Mans? Yes, yes, okay, cool. I assume that's why you're here. So you know what functionalities are here and missing. So I made this in about 8 hours, and so there are a few things that you want them classic, the door before the boss. Yes, but it actually is quite time consuming. So what I did is when you touch this, you just get transported to the next room. I hope you guys are fine with that. And then we have a boss, Tomahawk Man, from Mega Man 6. Oh man. I'm getting pretty good at this because I've tested it so many times. And there's no game over screen, but that should be pretty easy. Also, I picked the music I like the best. So the music, the boss fight was from Mega Man 3, and the stage was from Hardman. So, any questions so far? Okay, feel free to ask me any questions during the workshop. Like, I would actually prefer it if you ask questions instead of me going on like some sort of monologue about what to do. And feel free to like stop me or slow me down or tell me to go back to a window if you're lost. So let's see. I wish I can close this. Can't close this? Cool. I guess one last thing that I kind of skip over, the limitations of GameMaker Lite. So GameMaker provides a bunch of predefined functions. They provide a ton of predefined functions. Let's see. Instance. Let's see, we have. If you go to their help file and you do a search for some sort of related concept, they'll give you a list of all the functions that they have available for that. And the documentation is pretty good, I think. They explain what each function does pretty well. But the thing with GameMaker Lite is there are some more advanced functions that you won't be able to access with a Lite edition. With 2D games, that doesn't apply as much, but with 3D games, you do kind of want the advanced features, or you can use Unity, I guess. So that's that. So can everyone open up Mega Man starting and have it on their home screen? So you can also have Mega Man full open for source code reference. Like if I go here, I should go here. Don't let this scare you because this is the longest part. You'll have the full source code available for debugging, or if you want to just copy and paste it to catch up, feel free to do that. Actually, for reference, use Mega Man Lean instead, because Mega Man 4 actually caused some of the sound that I deleted in the Lean version. So you want to use the Lean version as a reference. And you can use the tutorial later on, so just go ahead and hide the tutorial and close the Yo-Yo Games page. Okay, so are we all on the same page? Yeah? Okay. So let's go with starting. So in the interest of time, there's a few peculiarities about this template file. So one thing is if you look at if you go down to the rooms directory and you look at room stage, there is a stage that's kind of already pre-made. So this is so that we won't have to spend time designing the entire stage from scratch. And later on, you'll see that it's actually really very easy to just create a stage. So this room is actually longer than how much like the scrolling allows. So what you can do is basically, basically scroll in using either your mouse or your trackpad. And then when you zoom, you can roll your mouse forward to zoom out at a certain location on the stage. And this stage currently doesn't have any logic in it. Everything you see here are basically a background. They don't have any code that interacts with anything that's on the screen. And we're going to be designing everything that we put in the room, perhaps for the exception of the boss, because I don't know if I have time to write it from scratch. So I also left that in. If we have time, we'll put it in. If we don't have time, or if we're interested in something else, then we'll leave him out for now. You can always refer to the full version, the full source file, to see how the boss was implemented. Okay. So far, so good? So let me briefly go over what the sprites, backgrounds, scripts, and objects are. So the sprites are basically just graphic assets that we load into GameMaker. You can click on one of those to open it. And I'm going to open this one because there's more things I want to show. This is a picture of Mega Man, you all know. And we basically load this from any sort of image file, JPEG, PNG, bitmap. And we upload it, and we can later assign it to an object. This way, the object will look like that image that we uploaded. It will take the form of that image we uploaded. So one thing that you notice about this particular sprite that's different from, say, sprite block is that this one we have a number of sub-images, 3, and down here we have an arrow. What sub-images are basically additional frames associated with this specific animation. So when Mega Man runs, it's 3 different frames of animation. He has, I think this one is, oh wow, this is black. I'm supposed to use blue. He has this. Man, I'm really bad at drawing. He has this, and then he swings one of his hand back, and then I guess his leg go forward. And then there's sort of a transition where he looks kind of, I guess, like a stick figure without hands almost. And then he just loops through these to make it look like that Mega Man is running. If you click on the arrow, you'll see that it's not exactly what I've drawn, but it's pretty similar. If you go to edit sprites, you get a better view of all 3 frames of the animation. And I've loaded these animations in beforehand because it's actually kind of time-consuming to make sure that you load every image in, format it properly so that it doesn't so the sub-images are not out of place, and to make sure that its bounding box is well set, well defined, or defined the best way possible for all the sprites. Loading sprites and saving sprites are pretty intuitive, but if you want me to go over it, we can do it later. But for now, use all the sprites I have already loaded into the file. Another thing to take interest in is the origin down here. We have x equals 13, y equals 28. So what the origin does is, let's say we have an image, and we have an object that takes the form of this image. And let's say we have a screen that's this big, and we want to place the image at, let's say, 100, 100. So we say, okay, well, just put this image at 100, 100. But GameMaker is going to ask, well, do you want me to put it here, put it here, put it in the middle, put it at the corner? How do you want me to put it? The way you answer this question is by saying we have an origin for this image. We can specify if we want the image to have its top left corner be at 100, 100. We specify that the origin is right here. You can use two different colors. And if we want the image to be centered at 100, 100, then we put the image, then we put the origin here, exactly in the center. So GameMaker knows to place the image in the center. Make sense? Okay. And one quick thing while I'm on this point, GameMaker's coordinate system, the 0, 0 is the top left corner. And as you go down, the y value increases. And as you go right, the x value increases. So I think this might be like a sort of standard thing that game engines do. Okay, so, another thing about the origin is when you have an object that takes on the image, you can say, I want the object dot x to be, we want the x position of object to be at 50. Or let's say create object 2 at x, y. So when you use x and y, when you write the object's code, you'll interpret the x and y as the origin of the object. I'll go on that later. It might be a little confusing for now, but I'll make it more clear. So we defined Mega Man's origin to be at 1328 because that's where we want him to stand at his origin, in the sense that we have the blue Mega Man. Let's just use this as Mega Man for now. We say we want to place him at the ground level, and the ground is, say, y equals 20. We can say Mega Man dot y is equal to 20. And when we tell the Mega Man object to do that, you'll just stand there naturally above ground when we call that code. Am I still making sense? Okay. And let's look at the mask pretty fast. So if you click on Modify Mask, you'll see that there's this dark box that Mega Man is boxed in. This is basically what GameMaker uses for collision detection. In games, very often, you don't, when you have a sprite, the collision box of that sprite is not, usually not exactly this. And does anyone know why? Tyler, you seem to know why.
Yeah, because that's very inefficient. It takes a lot of processing power to calculate collisions between objects of that shape.
Okay, right. So basically, we want, when we do collision detection, we want to use simple geometry because we study geometry a lot. We know it very well. We have formulas that can fast and efficiently calculate whether two boxes are colliding. But if you have an object that looks like a star, and you have an object that looks like a square with pants, it's really hard to determine whether they're colliding or not. So GameMaker does support this kind of precise collision checking, but the other thing about using simple geometry is it also makes our job easier because we can tell easier whether two things are colliding or not. So as you can see for this image right here, we just bound Mega Man in that collision box. If you open up, say, a different one, say the sprite character jump shoot, and you look at the mask, it's slightly different. this collision box doesn't cover entire Mega Man. I'll go in detail to why that is later. But as you can see, they're all squares, and I try to make them a little more intuitive by having basically their feet at the edge of the collision box. So I think that's all about sprites for now. Let's move on to backgrounds, since they're kind of similar to sprites. Backgrounds are like sprites, except they are simpler than sprites. You can't really assign a background to an object. A background is just there to be shown. It's not supposed to have any logic associated behind it, except moving around. And the reason you want backgrounds is because we tend to do less processing on the backgrounds. So we want to tell GameMaker that, hey, this picture is a background. We are not going to do any logic with it, so don't waste all your resources on making a background, on making that image a sprite. So here's one of the backgrounds we're using. You probably recognized it from the game. We also have the sunset background that we'll be using for the boss fight. And finally, there is a background tile, which is interesting. So basically, what a tile is, or I should say what a tile set is, we have loaded here a tile set. It's an image that can be divided into smaller parts that doesn't necessarily have to be connected with other parts. And I think this will make more sense if I actually do a quick demo. So you don't have to do this. I'm just doing this for purpose of demonstration. So I have a room now, and I want to load a tile. And if you look at the tile I have for bkg_tile, notice the similarities between what I can select and what the boxes are. So let me make the background black. Tiles. With tiles, I can just say, put this thing here. And I'm going to make the room a little bit smaller. Oh, I guess we can do that. We can put a cactus here. We can put a sign here. We can do a whole bunch of things. Basically, a tile set makes it so that you can easily make levels without having to draw the entire thing from scratch. And these tiles are like backgrounds in the sense that there's no logic behind it. It's just there for you to look at. And if you want to put logic behind it, you put objects there, except you make it not visible so that they're on the screen, but what the user really sees is the tile behind it. Does that make sense? Okay. Feel free to ask questions. I really don't want to lose anyone. Sure. So that's for backgrounds. Scripts we're going to go over later. Objects are really the star of GameMaker, and I think of any object-oriented programming language. Basically, objects are where all the logic happens. So go ahead and say create an object up here. And we're going to learn what an object is by working with it. We're going to name it object underscore block. And remember how I said we'll put an object there, but we'll make it invisible so that the user sees the tile, but not the object itself. We're going to make that invisible thing that I was talking about. We're going to give it a sprite, give it an appearance, and we'll use sprite underscore block. Notice how it's all like blue and ugly. We don't really want to see it, so we turn off the visible flag. And surprisingly, that's it for the block. We don't need to define any logic yet for it. So now if you were to go to room stage, you notice that the block shows up right here. And in this object tab, I can place objects that I've designed into the scene. So let's go ahead and surround this place with some blocks. Something like this. Just some sort of L shape. You don't have to do the exact same thing that I did, but some vague resemblance. Sure. So we have that, and now we're going to make it so that we have Mega Man himself on the screen. So it's going to be very similar. We make a new object, and we give it the name of char for character. That's just my shorthand notation. But please use this for now, because all the logic that I'll type later on will be referring to char as standing for character. And we give it the image for sprite character still. Mega Man's just standing still for now. We want him to be visible. And we're going to go ahead and add some events. So events will require a little bit of explanation. So right now what I made is a creation event. It says that when this object is created, I'm going to do everything that's listed under actions. What you'll see as a good analogy for events is basically very general if statements. This create event can be seen as if the object is created. And if you look at the add events, there's quite a few other different events. Destroy is when this object is destroyed. And under mouse, you have when the left button is pressed on this object, when the right button is pressed on this object. Just a whole bunch of events that allows you to go into the actions panel to put in actions for when that if condition comes out to be true. So under creation event, we're going to first define Mega Man's horizontal speed. So under the control tab, we're going to put in a block called execute code. And you'll realize that I tend to do a lot of things with the code block instead of the default blocks that GameMaker provides. It's mainly because having code makes it easier for copy and paste, and it also is more versatile in terms of functionality and the order of events that happen, order of actions that happen, I should say. So we're just going to go ahead and set a variable here, hspeed is equal to 2. So I'm using all caps as a notation to signify that we aren't going to modify this variable later on. It's a standard practice in programming. But if we have something that we want to change, we can say hspeed is equal to 0. Since the variable names are not case sensitive, we can define both of these without them being in conflict with each other. And we're actually going to use both of these variables, so go ahead and write lowercase hspeed is equal to 0. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go under step. So what step is basically something that happens every single frame. Video games now often run at 60 frames per second, and there are often things that we want to happen every frame. For example, if the player is controlling it, is pressing down the left or the right, we want the game to check every frame to see if the button is holding down. We don't want to check every second, because if we check every second, then Mega Man's only going to move once every second, right? And that would be really, really choppy. So step is just something that happens every single frame. The frame per second for the game itself that we have right now is 60 frames per second. If you look under settings, you don't have to do that right now, but we can see that speed is 60. That indicates the game is running at 60 frames per second. So we're going to put in some very basic movement code. And here is when you start using some of the default GameMaker functions. So the one I'm going to use right now is if keyboard underscore check, in parentheses, VK left. And we're going to say hspeed is equal to 2. And then we'll have a copy that statement and say if keyboard check VK right hspeed. Actually, hspeed up here will be -2. Hspeed here is 2. Oh. Quick apology. Let me change that to hspeed because we defined the capital H speed to be 2. So at the end of this step event, we're going to say x plus equals hspeed. So is anyone really confused by this code so far? No? Okay. So we're just going to do that, and then we open up room stage once again. I'm going to close this. And we see that we have Mega Man right here. We'll just put him in right there. Actually, let's put him in up here. Because right now, you see we don't have any code that tells Mega Man to fall. So Mega Man will just be moving left to right. And let's test it out. So go ahead and save your game. And click the Run the Game button. He's blinking very fast. One thing that I forgot to change. So you might have noticed that even when I release the button, Mega Man is still moving. And that's because at the end of every frame, we forgot to reset hspeed back to 0. So we're going to do that down here. Hspeed is equal to 0. And we'll run the game. So now when you release the button, Mega Man should stop moving. Okay. Pretty cool, but not the coolest. One thing you might notice is Mega Man also blinks very fast. He's blinking like 10 times a second. So we're gonna change that by going back to our creation event, and this will let me touch upon the logic of how animation works. So GameMaker has predefined variables that it uses for each object. You notice the x and y. These are predefined objects, and behind the scene, GameMaker sets the x and the y to the position that you changed it to so that you can access it, and you can also change it sometimes to reflect both what has been done to it and what you want to do to it. So another default variable GameMaker provides is image index. What this is it basically tells you and the object itself what is the current animation frame we're on. So you don't have to do this, but I'm going to go back to run and show you the 3 frames. So each of these frames have an image index associated with it. It's 0 index, so the first one is going to be 0. So if I ask what is the image index, return image index. Is everyone familiar with return? Yes? Okay. Is anyone not familiar with return? Better question. Okay. It'll tell me this is going to be either 0 or 3 or 6 or 9 if it's associated with the first frame. 1, 4, 7, 10 if it's the second frame, and 2, 5, 8, 11 if it's in the third frame. So this might seem a little bit confusing, but keep in mind that GameMaker assumes that when you put in 3 different animation files, or actually, let me use Pac-Man because he's the better example. So we have can't draw Pac-Man. So so it assumes you want to loop between these images constantly. So behind the scene, GameMaker adds 1 to image index every frame. So the first frame image index will be this. The second frame will be this. The third frame will be this. And GameMaker just like keeps doing that. And what you'll see on the screen is that after one frame, the animation goes from the first one to the second one. After the second frame, it goes from the second one to the third one. And then if you don't tell GameMaker to stop, you'll just keep looping through it. Just like that. So that's what GameMaker does. The problem we had with the standing Mega Man and his blinking problem is that incrementing our image index by 1 each frame is actually too fast. Basically, when we have the Pac-Man, we have 3 frames, and we have 60 frames per second. So this animation is going to happen 20 times per second, and it's definitely not going to work because that's too fast. So we want to change how fast GameMaker increments image index. So remember how I said it increments it by 1 each time? It actually increments it by a variable called image speed. The default value for image speed is 1. So what we're going to do is we want to slow down Mega Man's blinking speed by a factor of 10. So what we'll do is say image speed is now is now 0.1. This way, after every 10 frames, image index is going to go up by 1, and we will have our slow blinking Mega Man. So under creation, put in exactly what I wrote. And let's try it out. Oh, was I going too fast? Sorry. Oh, that's the wrong one. Oh, sorry, image speed. Yeah, my bad. Yeah, definitely tell me if I'm going too fast again. So this is all we need to read. All we need to write to make animation go slower. So now when you run the game, Mega Man will be blinking slowly, and that's nice. Okay. So I think the next thing I want to go for is the next thing I want to go for is collision detection. And this is, I guess, where I come to like a dilemma, because collision detection, it's one of the most basic things that you will see in any game, especially in platformers. I'm going to use blue for Mega Man out of respect. Do I have blue for Mega Man? Yes. It's one of the most basic things that a game needs, but also it's one of the most hairy logic that you will encounter in games. So the code for navigating Mega Man is actually quite complicated. And I think we will definitely have time to go through it if you guys choose to do so now. But my plan is to skip collision detection for now. And once we've worked more with GameMaker, we'll come back to the collision detection if we have time. And I have a lot of time today, so I'll be staying after probably until about 3. So if you're still interested in collision detection by then, I can still go over it. Is that okay? Okay. So for now, no collision detection, and we're going to put in some code that I've pre-written. So under scripts, you'll see that I have written 2 scripts. One is collision manage and one is grounded. We are going to use collision manage, and basically what scripts are, if you look at keyboard check I have here, it's a function that's provided by default by GameMaker. But let's say I want to have what if I want to have some sort of action that includes multiple functions that I want GameMaker to use, but I'm also going to call that action multiple times. So I have action 1, action 2, action 3. I want these to happen in a group, but I also want these to happen at a bunch of other places. But I don't want to have to rewrite it every time and go back and change it every single time when I want to, every time I want to make a change. So the way that GameMaker helps you deal with this is through writing scripts. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to make a custom script. And I can say here, image index. This is just like code for demonstration. X plus equal 2, y minus equal 3. If I want this to happen every time, why can't I just write the script and just have the GameMaker call the script? And GameMaker's like, well, I'll let you do that if you write it in the script. So basically what I've done is I put all the collision detection logic under collision manage. And we're going to use collision manage. We're going to call collision manage at the very end of our script in order to do all the collision detection. So the collision manage, let me check something real fast. Okay. So let me see if this works. I actually forgot to test this yesterday, so if it breaks, I will have to fix it. Oh, for those of you who didn't see, I deleted most of the code I have here. I'm actually just going to write collision manage because I think all that code is under collision manage. kind of. We're going to write some control code later on, actually. So we'll see what happens. Oh, all right. I have to define a few other variables up here. So let me see that error again real fast. Gravity. So we see that we have two variables that we didn't declare beforehand, and we're going to declare under the creation event. We'll set gravity to 0.3, and we'll set our, what is it? What's the other? Graph equals 0. And we're going to have some counterparts to our h speed. We'll have a lowercase v speed. We're also going to have something called jump speed, -5.8. So one thing you'll notice is that I come up with these like random magic numbers that just happen to work. That doesn't really happen in real life. You spend a lot of your time developing to test different values and see whether they work in your game. So this -5.8 right here, I've experimented with a bunch of different numbers and determined that -5.8 is the best number to use for that specific variable. And in the interest of time, we're not going to like do a bunch of different numbers and try it out. But take it for granted now, the numbers I give you, and if you want to change it, you can always do that later on. Okay. Is everyone still with me? Okay. So I think I might be missing a few other variables. So let me test it out, see what happens. Oh, never mind. Mega Man does not fall through the floor. Thank God. But we do notice that since we deleted the horizontal movement code, he doesn't move horizontally anymore. And that is definitely my fault, and we're going to rewrite it real fast. If keyboard check keyboard check. And actually, I don't think we have to add the x plus equals part, because that part is under the collision manage code. Let's try it, see if it works. Yay! So it does work, and it kind of does work. I need to change something else. Let's see. At the beginning of our code, let's set h speed back to 0. This is the same problem as last time. I keep running into the same problem. So what you'll see happening is that Mega Man now has a sort of gravity to him, and he won't fall through the floor. This is all under the collision manage code. And what you will also see, bye Rory. What you'll also see is that when you try to move Mega Man to the left, Mega Man actually detects that there are some invisible blocks there, and he won't go through it. And that's good, because that's how we want it to be. But you might have remembered that when we were doing the L-shaped blocks, we didn't put anything on the right. So if Mega Man keeps moving to the right, he's going to fall off. And we'll see if that's what happens. Yep, that's what happens. So I think now it should make a little more sense now why we make object block and make it invisible. Okay, so now that I've demonstrated it, we can go to the room and delete these blocks. And one thing that you might not think of at first is that we don't want Mega Man to fall off on the left, because what if the player, instead of going to the right, he just, well, I'm going to go left, I'm going to see what's behind me, and just falls off a cliff and dies. We want to stop it from doing that. So we're going to scroll out and put some blocks on the left out of the scene. This way, Mega Man won't fall off a cliff to the left. And while we're at this, we might as well fill in some of the rest of the terrain. So one thing that can speed up your process is if you hold down Shift and just drag the mouse, it'll just fill the region for you. And if you want to delete anything, you can right-click delete, or you can do Alt plus click. Oh, that's not it. What is the delete? I think it's Alt plus right. Wow, I forgot the shortcut key for that. Good thing they have instructions. They don't have a Control Shift. I think it's Control. Oh, right click Control, yeah, I think. Yeah, so that lets you delete them fast.
Hold the Control key and then right click.
Yeah. I mean, it does make it a lot easier to fill in the terrain, so I'm not complaining. When it says there are instances or tiles outside the room, should I remove them? This time say no, because what we just put in was outside the room, so we don't want it to get removed. So let's take that out. Say no. And then when you run the game, and actually you can't see it now, but Mega Man at least won't fall off to the left. When he moves to the right, you'll realize he doesn't fall off either. Man, I feel like I should play some Mega Man music. Is anyone running into problems so far? Are we all good? Sweet. So after this, we want Mega Man to be able to jump. So we're going to write the code that will allow him to jump. And let me find the code. So the conditions that will make Mega Man jump, it's intuitive, but let's just outline it. Mega Man can't jump unless he is on the ground. If Mega Man is falling, he can do double jumps. That's in Mega Man Z, where you can do double jumps. So only when you're on the ground can you actually do jumps. So I've written a script. It's actually very simple, called grounded, that you'll return whether you're on the ground based on the place meeting function. And we're going to use this grounded code as a shortcut. So we say if grounded, as in Mega Man is on the ground, v speed is equal to, I believe, is it positive jump speed or negative jump speed? Let me check what my jump speed was. Yeah, is equal to jump speed. Maybe I should move it a little bit here so people can see it better.